to Reimagining Life, From Pain to Purpose, where you'll find a community focused on resilience and perseverance, sharing untold stories of hope and rebuilding while dealing with major life interruption. This podcast is made by and for people in the process of reimagining their lives. We're here to raise the voices of those who often suffer in silence, living with chronic pain and/or disability. This space is for you. We encourage you to get involved. So stick around and let's jump right into the next episode. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Chelsea Liebowitz to the podcast. Chelsea grew up in Farmington Hills, Michigan, where she endured her fair share of chronic illness. Despite constantly feeling ill, she was determined to find answers, so went to the University of Michigan in search of them. 3 degrees later, the answer wasn't found in school classrooms. It was found when she learned to trust herself. Chelsea completed her Doctor of Pharmacy degree and will share with us her personal perspective and experience about what happens behind the closed doors of the healthcare industry. We'll talk with Chelsea about being your own advocate and searching for answers, and also talk about how our bodies respond to and use medications to manage our conditions. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. You're one of our favorite kinds of guests. You're a reimaginer who became a professional reimaginer. So to give our listeners a little bit of perspective, could you share with us what makes you a reimaginer and what kind of physical and/or mental challenges have you had to deal with?
Yeah, so to be honest, it started pretty young for me. When I was really young, I couldn't hear. I had a bunch of ear infections. And so some of my earliest memories are of people telling me that I could hear, and I'm saying I can't hear, but I'm too young to actually really express what's happening, and they're not understanding. So I just had people from a young age really not believe me. And as I got older, then I developed scoliosis. I had spinal fusion, but before the surgery, I had doctors tell me that scoliosis wasn't painful, but I'm crying to my mom every night because my back hurts. And then it just kind of went on. I had jaw surgery, some sleep issues and sinus issues and allergies. And ultimately, I was just diagnosed with copper toxicity or copper overload, which is essentially heavy metal poisoning. And once we cured that or treated that, a lot of the pain issues kind of went away. But after all of that, I definitely have a lot of medical PTSD, some complex PTSD, and I have a lot of experiences with medical gaslighting and distrust of myself that has resulted from all of this.
That's understandable given all that's gone on. Wow. Was there a certain point or maybe period of your life when you felt like your major symptoms really impacted the way you had to live, or did you change your life because of them?
Yeah, I mean, so it was kind of a slow burn, right? I struggled with pain, but I didn't really understand what it was like to not struggle with pain. Mm-hmm. And I would go around and then I'd be like, your back doesn't hurt when you like sit for a long time. And people would be like, no. And I was like, what? I don't get it. Like, I really just didn't comprehend that people didn't have pain. So when I was younger, it was just pain was just part of my life. But when I got to college, I really kind of struggled mentally. And then that's really when like the major symptoms started. You know, I had jaw surgery. My jaw was wired shut. I became very malnourished, a little bit delusional. And I really just like struggled mentally. And that really made me like withdraw into myself. People didn't get it. I'm going through a lot of experiences that most people don't ever experience. And if they do, it's not till they're much older. And it was really hard. I lost a lot of friends. I became very isolated and introverted. And I missed out on a lot of the best years of our life moments because I was so focused on my health and taking care of me. There was school, and then there was my health, and the connections that I had were with therapists and doctors and, you know, professional healthcare providers, because I just didn't really have that many friends. That was really hard. And it's still, to this day, even creating those relationships sometimes is a struggle.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds like it. I can relate. I mean, that's not what normal college students are thinking about or dealing with or have any idea how to understand. So that must have been very isolating.
Yeah.
And that's something a lot of our listeners can certainly relate to.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people with chronic pain, a lot of the outside world looks at it as pain and like, oh, you're just not doing enough. And it's like, I'm doing enough. And also I'm fighting a battle that you can't even comprehend.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So true. So how did you go from, in college, sounds like you were really struggling. You were dealing with a lot of medical issues, some emotional, mental as well. So how did you eventually become a professional reimaginer?
So when I was in 8th grade, I decided what I wanted to do. I was one of those people that, I'm taking classes for high school and I knew that it would affect my college. And so I really wanted to figure it out. Little type A personality, right? So in 8th grade, I decided I wanted to be a pharmacist. My mom was a pharmacy tech and my dad was the owner of a pharmacy company. And I was like, I'm going to be the pharmacist. So I decided in 8th grade that I wanted to be a pharmacist. And so as I struggled, I held out the fact that I wanted answers. I wanted answers for my pain. I wanted a magic cure for my pain. There must be some pill or some test that tells me all of the answers for why I've struggled so miserably for so long. And I held on to that hope that there was answers. So I just kept pushing through to get that PharmD. And then, that obviously I graduated, became a pharmacist and started working for an insurance company. But really it was just that determination to find an answer that kept me going, even though I wanted to quit many, many times. And so when I was in pharmacy, you have retail, you have clinical, and I really love the clinical aspect of it. I think a pharmacist is a very underrated tool in the healthcare system. I think, like if you were in the hospital and you were to code, a pharmacist comes on the code to make sure they're giving you the right medications and enough of the right medications and making sure you don't have any allergies. And I thought that was so cool. And at the end of the day, I decided that was a lot of pressure. It was not for me. And I decided to go to insurance, which my dad knew a lot about. And I just felt like that was the best fit for me, particularly because I was always curious about insurance for my own needs. So it kind of, my own learning and my own desire to get questions answered led me down this path.
Wow. You were very determined 8th grader.
I was.
You must have been pretty brave and quite a fighter to, go through all that you were dealing with and still push ahead and become that pharmacist.
Yeah.
So, kudos to you. that must not have been easy.
Not at all.
So what have you learned? So now you're sort of working on the inside of an insurance company, which is a very different perspective in our healthcare system. What have you learned from working on the inside with the company? And what do you think is important for reimaginers, those are the people who are having to reimagine their lives, to understand when we're dealing with insurance companies?
So whenever you think of insurance company, the first thought that usually comes to mind is like, man, those insurance companies. Someone higher up has set the boundary and the people that work for the plan have to follow those rules or we risk our jobs. And so every single plan design is different. And if you pick a bad plan for you, there's nothing we can do about it. So, and that's the hardest part sometimes is I see these claims. So I work with pharmacy claims specifically. I don't do any of the medical stuff, but I work with all these pharmacy claims and I see these medications come in and I'm like, wow, like this doctor wrote a really nice note. They really need this medication. However, their plan does not cover specialty and there's nothing I can do to help them. And that's really, really frustrating for me. And that's like, I can only imagine what it's like. And so the biggest thing that I would suggest for someone is look at their claims or look at their medications and make sure their plan covers it before they pick it. Like, don't just pick the cheapest one. Make sure, especially if you're on a chronic medication, go through and be like, would this medication be covered? What tier would this medication be at? Can I afford this monthly, or do I need to get the slightly more expensive plan to pay less for my medications?
Can you tell us a little bit about sort of what it's like? I don't have much of a picture of what it's like working behind the scenes inside the insurance company. You get these pharmacy claims. Do you only see the things that are denied and you're trying to find a solution, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I have a system where if you're our member, I can see all of your claims. It will run through the insurance. So most of the time, the claims pay. I can see what your copay would be. If you were to call and say, what's my copay structure? I can answer that question for you. Although a lot of things that I deal with are called prior authorizations. Mm-hmm. So when you go to the pharmacy and your pharmacist says, we can't fill your prescription, we need to get a prior authorization from the insurance company, the prior authorization is getting sent to a pharmacist or similar behind the scenes, and that person is reviewing documentation that your doctor has to fill out and then determines if the plan wants to pay for it. So the other thing is people are like, oh, the insurance should have to pay for it. But especially with sometimes if you work for an employer group, they might be self-funded, meaning they're paying for it out of pocket. And if they're paying for it, they want to make sure that you're using it for the appropriate indication, that you've tried some other cheaper alternatives, that you're using the correct quantity. Because sometimes if you don't really need 30 tablets, right, there's for Imitrex or other migraine medications, usually have a quantity limit. They're not going to allow you to fill 30, but some doctors are just going to say, hey, I'm going to prescribe 30 and your insurance is going to pay what it's going to pay for. So there's a prior authorization in place to basically require the fact that only 9 are allowed. So that's kind of what happens behind the scenes. The doctor usually fills out some paperwork, answers some questions, and then they make a determination based off of that.
So it's kind of like checks and balances between the doctor and behind the insurance company, sounds like.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So I can tell from personal experience, and I'm sure many others as well can, it often feels like the insurance company is the enemy. Like you said, you're kind of like, how do you feel about an insurance company? So often when we're struggling to function and we're really not feeling well, that's the time when we're going to have probably the most interaction with these insurance companies. So are there any lessons learned that you can share with us about how most effectively engage with insurance companies?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not fair that when we're sick, we have to jump through hoops. It's like, here we are already struggling to exist, and to get something that's going to help us live, we have to jump through all of these hoops. We can refuse to jump through the hoops. However, that's only hurting us, right? And so it's just a very unfair situation, and I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
My advice would be to use your anger and your grief and your pain to fuel your next action. You're going to feel all of those emotions anyways. You're going to be angry. You're going to be sad. You're grieving a life that you no longer have. And you might as well use it for something good. I'm very big about alchemizing your pain into something positive. I'm angry. I'm gonna write the most detailed note I can possibly write. Right? Like, just get petty with it. And here's why. When your doctor or you send something to your insurance company, whatever is on what you wrote happened, and if it's left off of that document, it didn't happen. Right? So sometimes if you need a migraine prevention, they want you to try prophylaxis. So like a beta blocker, like propranolol. They want you to try like an anti-epileptic, like Topamax, and then some like Effexor as an antidepressant. If you've tried them, but your doctor only writes one, it's going to be denied because you have to try all 3. Document everything. You on the back end too, when we get a prior authorization for a migraine medication or whatever medication it might be, we have prior authorization guidelines that literally we have to look at your notes and say, do you check all of these boxes? Have they tried all of these alternatives? If your doctor doesn't write that down or it's not written down, it didn't happen, right? Make a list, notes in your phone, make a list so that way you can say, yes, I tried this. This is what happened.
Mm-hmm. Is there a way for patients to, I don't know, like a place that they can go for help to basically say, hey, I've been trying to deal with this insurance company. It's not going well. This is what I'm trying to get to. Like, is there any way, is there any entity there?
Yeah. So if you have an employer sponsored insurance, meaning it's through your company, I would go to HR because they probably have a specific rep that's there. Sometimes you can call the insurance company and talk to the case manager who's on the case. If you can find one person who kind of knows everything, that's definitely the best, just because it will save you hours of time of repeating the same information that you've repeated to every single doctor already. Case managers, sometimes they have patient advocates. You can call your doctor. There's usually like a doctor's office has some type of patient advocate or a prior authorization specialist type person. You kind of have to ask around for it, but someone there should know. And then, you can always call the insurance company, like I said, and they might have a case manager. There are manufacturer assistance foundations or manufacturer assistance programs and foundations. So if your insurance is just straight up denying the medication and it's a brand name medication, you can just go onto Google, type in the brand name of your drug and type in patient assistance program. And a lot of manufacturers will offer you the drug free of charge if your insurance is straight up denying it or if you don't have insurance. And that is something that I recommend to a lot of patients, just because your plan doesn't cover specialty, but you still need the medication. So try to go to the manufacturer and request assistance there. Sometimes there's foundations for really specific conditions. They're usually for more rare conditions, but they exist, right? So type in your condition name and foundations, type in the drug name foundations, and some search in that way.
That's a good tip. I've tried doing that for myself, and I know of others who have done it as well. And sometimes it works, and sometimes, especially if you're on disability, it doesn't work because they say you can't be on patient assistance when you're on. Yeah. Right. But obviously that's not your area. But I just wanted to include that. So people are aware of it.
I always encourage them to apply anyways, because sometimes what they say is like, okay, come back when you're in the donut hole. Sometimes they have copay card assistance where you're like, hey, I'm having it covered, but it's $1,000. They can give you a copay card, which should help lower the cost of it. Sometimes there, unfortunately, is just nothing that can be done. And it's heartbreaking every time I have to tell someone that there's nothing that I can do. Yeah.
Those are good tips, though. I think that's helpful. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about medications specifically, since this is your area of expertise. What can you share about the way our bodies process medications, and what do you wish more people would understand from a pharmacological standpoint?
Yeah, so there's kind of two things that I want to talk about. There's one where you have an actual deficiency. For instance, type 1 diabetics are insulin deficient. They need insulin because their body, their pancreas, is not producing insulin, and there's nothing that can be done to make that body suddenly make insulin, and therefore they need to take insulin because that is a chemical, a compound that exists in your body naturally that you need to supplement. This can also happen with growth hormones. Sometimes you might have a growth hormone deficiency. Think about it as like a vitamin deficiency. Like my body's just not making enough vitamin D. In these
Mm-hmm.
cases, the way that these medications and supplements are working is literally to fulfill the body's natural processes that need to happen for you to function and stay at homeostasis.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like we need insulin to process food. Before there was insulin, type 1 diabetics would die, right?
Yeah.
And that's very different than a way a lot of the other medications are working. And these medication and most drugs are designed to target a specific pathway that has been up or down regulated. So up regulated means it's been turned on, down regulated usually means it's turned off. So
Okay.
the body will always find homeostasis. And that's why, for me personally, I'm a really big proponent of finding the root cause. I want to know why my body's so sensitive. I want to know why I'm in pain all the time. And for me, it was heavy metal poisoning, right? And standard doctors don't test for copper and zinc and minerals and vitamin levels just because drugs aren't designed to treat them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your body will find homeostasis, whatever it means. So like if you have heavy metal poisoning, your body is going to be inflamed. You're going to have a lot of inflammation. That's going to lead to a lot of issues like weight gain. You're going to have some joint pain because you're just swollen. And that's your body's way of protecting itself. And so like a tablecloth, when you pull on one end, it affects the other. When you affect one pathway, it affects the other. So most drugs are given for symptom relief. These drugs will affect a single pathway and they really will down or upregulate other pathways. And so sometimes when you treat one thing, it's very often that they're on another one. It's very common for patients to be on a statin for cholesterol, an ACE inhibitor, or other heart blood pressure medication, and then eventually they develop diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
I could go and have a whole other conversation about why I think this happens with the food that we're eating and everything. But really, big pharma is here to symptom manage. And these medications are, symptom management. So when people design something like a statin, they said, okay, all of these people have high cholesterol. What's that pathway? And they did some research and they did some digging and they identified the pathway. So they're like, okay, how can we have a drug that artificially targets this pathway? And that's what they did. So these medications aren't necessarily curing you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be the answer to all of your questions, right? Like, okay, if your body's accumulating cholesterol, this will help get rid of the cholesterol, but why is your body accumulating cholesterol in the first place?
For people with chronic illness and disability, often we're left searching for that kind of explanation, but many times, unfortunately, it's not available or we can't get it because, like you said, maybe there's not a test for that, or maybe there's, the many, many doctors that we've seen, sort of say, I can't tell you why this is happening, but I think this and this and this. And why don't we try these things to try to give you some relief, which
Right.
is absolutely not a cure. But it's, trying to improve our quality of life.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. And I think the other thing that needs to be said too is sometimes it's just very costly. Like if you're on a income, you can't go to a naturopathic doctor that's going to be $200 a visit, and then you're going to need $200 in tests and then $200 in supplements a month. Like it's very expensive to really find root causes.
Absolutely.
So for the patients who are on medications, what I would recommend is, absolutely use the tools you have available to you to manage your symptoms. And I'd also encourage people to think of these medications as a tool, right? Like it's not a cure-all. It's not a magic fix. It's a tool to get you from point A to point B. For instance, antidepressants can literally show you what it's like to feel happy when you maybe haven't felt happy in decades. right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you're going to take this antidepressant. You're going to be like, wow, this is what it feels like to get up and want to do things. This is what it feels like to see that like the grass is actually green. Like it's all just like blurred and gray together, right? And I share this from personal experience. I was on antidepressants for a long time. And I really think that they need to be a tool to help you create habits and a lifestyle that eventually one day you might not need the medication. Like same with like, for instance, also Ozempic and the weight loss medications right now. People are thinking it's a magical fix for weight loss.
Yeah.
I think that they could be good to maybe jumpstart it. I'm not certain about the long-term effects of it. And how it affects nutrition and vitamin levels. But it certainly can be a tool. Okay, I need to lose 10 pounds. Let me take this for 2 months. And then I'm really going to focus on diet and exercise. I'm really going to focus on, okay, I really need to eat better. The problem is we didn't get sick overnight, and we're not going to get better overnight. And it's a long, arduous process that takes time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I know that many chronic pain sufferers end up being on medications for sometimes decades or almost an entire life.
Yeah.
And if the medicines continue to help them, it becomes this question of, it's helping in this way, but maybe it's having negative effects in the other way. And how do you sort of weigh which is better to tolerate? So it's a struggle.
100%. It's a struggle.
So I've heard you talk about this dependency versus addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you can briefly just explain that a little bit. And then can you talk about how do patients know when to decrease medicines? And if they try to decrease, the difference between a short-term withdrawal versus are they actually going to be okay off of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So most people, when taking a drug chronically, will form some sort of dependence on that medication. For instance, every single human being is dependent on water, right? That's not a bad thing. It just means that we need it. So when you take a medication chronically, your body will adjust and to that level of medication and may up or down regulate other pathways to make up for what's happening. So for instance, when you're taking an SSRI, it's a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And so it basically keeps serotonin in your neurotransmitters, in your little synapses for longer for your body to use more of it. So when you start taking that, you actually upregulate and you create more serotonin pathways. When you stop taking it, you suddenly don't really have as much serotonin in these synapses. And so you have all these pathways that are trying to scramble and want the serotonin, but there's not enough of it. So when that happens, that's when you start to feel withdrawal symptoms. So if you've been doing other things and you've been helping it, there are times, and it's very possible that just being on it for so long and then getting off of it, your body will be like, oh, we don't have that drug anymore. I need to create more serotonin. And that's kind of the hope that I would think is that like your body is very adaptive. It's very quick. But when you do stop that SSRI, you do have some withdrawal symptoms. So that's kind of like dependency a little bit, right? Like your body is going to be dependent on it. It's going to become used to it. That is just natural for anything you take for an extended period of time.
Mm-hmm.
When it becomes addiction is when it becomes much more psychological and dangerous. So you're like, I need this medication. I will do anything. I will put myself into dangerous situations to get it. That's really like addiction. And so some people, a lot of doctors will classify their patients as addicts because they're taking the medication regularly and the doctor isn't really helping them taper off of the medication. And so when they lower the dose or they don't have enough, they're actually in pain. And so there needs to be a lot of education around tapering off medication. Pain medication is a very unique situation in that you can actually, as you take more medications, can actually feel more pain, like hyperalgesia. You actually like become sensitive to pain. So addiction, on the other hand, is more psychological and dangerous. It's when you start saying, I need this medication, I will do anything, and I will put myself into dangerous situations to get the medication. Pain pills are a little different because when you take a lot of pain pills for a long time, a lot of opioids, you can actually become more sensitive to pain because pain is a signal to your body that lets it know something's wrong. There are actual people who are born without pain receptors, and they actually have a shorter life expectancy because the pain lets us know not to do something. So you get like little 5 and 6 year olds who will jump off the highest thing of the play structure because while it hurts other people, it doesn't hurt them and they want to be cool. And then they break bones and they don't really know that they're broken. So we need our pain receptors. And so if you take a lot for a long time, your body will become very sensitive to pain. And so as we taper off of these medications, it's really hard for patients to taper off of that and their body to adapt. And some doctors will classify a patient who's on regular painkillers every month as an addict. And that always makes me really sad because it's, their body has just become dependent on that level of pain relief. And tapering off too fast or too quickly is really what triggers a lot of people into addiction. And then they're like, well, I need this medication. I'm going to go get it on the street. And now they're getting it mixed with fentanyl. And then now they're addicted. They've put something else in it. And now they don't know what they're having, and they're overdosing. And that's when it gets really scary.
Yeah.
So most other medications you don't really get addicted to them in the way like opioids or like benzodiazepines are, simply because there's not really like this big rush for it and there's not the big crash after it. So avoiding feelings is a lot of things what can lead to addiction. Like, I don't want to feel this pain. I don't want to feel this anxiety. And that sometimes contributes to addiction. So in terms of withdrawal and kind of when they can come off the medication, if you're on any type of antidepressant, a benzodiazepine, opioids, muscle relaxants, these medications, you're going to feel a more significant withdrawal effect. And I just want to say that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you're addicted. It doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It's just simply like you've given your body this for so long and now you're taking it away. It's just is going to take a few days or a few weeks for your body to really figure out like, hey, we don't need it. And so that's why I kind of mentioned before that when you're taking these medications, you really want to start creating habits and lifestyle that will support you when you come off of the medication. For instance, if you get put on an antidepressant because you're really stressed in school, like I took it almost all through college, and then it wasn't until after I got graduated and got out of college that I got off of the antidepressant. Once you get out of that situation and you feel like you have a control on your life, you're like, I've been feeling really good for so long. I'm doing these things that make me happy. I'm seeing friends. I'm being social. I'm creating art. I'm working out. I'm playing sports, whatever that might be. Then you can go to your doctor and say, hey, I really think that I want to start decreasing this. And I would love for people to do it with their doctor. And so what will happen is the doctor will lower your dose. And you might feel some shakes, depending on the medication. It depends on what it might be. Some muscle spasms is a common one. And, it's okay. And if you're going through that right now, what I would say to you is it's okay. We knew this was going to happen. You are safe. You're choosing to do this. Your body is resilient. It is adaptable, and it can very easily learn new ways. And lean into the other habits you had. Lean into, journaling. Lean into your friends and your art and whatever. And if you just need to lay in bed for a day, just do that. Eventually, what happened for me, this is from my own personal experience, is I was on Cymbalta. And Cymbalta, you can actually break apart the capsules, and it has all these little like beads. Mm-hmm. So I got to the point where I'm taking like 3 beads a day.
Wow.
Maybe even other day, right? Just because like my body, like I would start like having really bad tremors. And I was like, I hate these tremors. And I'm taking these 3 beads. And then it would be like, it almost kind of felt like an addiction. Like, oh my gosh, I need to get my 3 beads. Like, I can't take this. And I was just like, you know what? I'm so like, it was a cycle that kept repeating day in and day out. And I was like, I'm just going to stop. It is going to suck for 2 to 3 days and then I'll be fine. And that's what happened. And actually I got off antidepressants and I went back on antidepressants for a little bit and then I got off them. It's all okay. It doesn't mean anything about your character. It doesn't mean you failed, right? Like sometimes you need to like stabilize and be like, oh my gosh, this is great off of it. And then you're like, this is like, your body's like, this is not safe. I need to go back on it. You go back on it. And then you're like, oh, actually, I'm ready. It's okay, right? Like,
yeah,
it's just a tool.
Yeah. And it's a process. I mean, nothing happens overnight.
Correct. We didn't get sick overnight. We're not going to get healed overnight. We were on the medication for a long time. Our body likes it. I think that when we're on a medication, we can do a lot of work with our minds to remind us like we are safe. Even though our body is hurting, we are safe, because with chronic illness, we learn like our trust of our body. We lose that trust and that ability to really know what's going on, because we go to the doctor and they're like, oh, you're not that sick. And you're like, really? Because I feel really sick right now. And they don't trust you. And then you don't trust yourself. And so if you're on medication, what I really would just encourage is you to really build that relationship back up with yourself. Become your best friend. Make friends with the pain. What is it telling you? What does it want you to know? When does it come up? There's something called secondary gain with these things. And it's also like, do I happen to get sick whenever I don't want to be doing something? Right? Like I had to admit that to myself that, oh, I don't want to do something. I happen to get migraines, right? I have a migraine. I can't do it. And then I just decided if I just said, hey, I don't want to do it, then I didn't really have a migraine. I didn't have to do it anyways. And I learned to speak up for myself. And then my body was like, oh, like, hey, you listened to the fact that I was not comfortable going there. I didn't want to go there. And so then I didn't need to give you a migraine because you listened to me.
That's very wise, I think.
Lots of self-awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing those.
Yeah.
I think that'll be really helpful to people. I hope it will be helpful.
I hope so.
So, given all of your experiences personally and professionally, do you feel like you have a changed perspective either as a patient or as a pharmacist?
Yeah, I think being on both ends certainly has given me more compassion than perhaps some other healthcare providers. When you're a healthcare provider, you see sick people all the time, and it becomes more of a job, right? It is a job. Mm-hmm. You see someone who's sick, okay, oh, they're sick. Here we go again, right? Like, not that if you have a healthcare provider that says that to your face, get rid of them, please.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, as a patient, we're thinking that same thing. Here I go again. I got to go back to the doctor. Like, it's just part of life, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that there are some people, I believe the healthcare system is a little ableist and going through the process, right? Like you have to be able to maintain a certain level of consistency, a certain level of output for a certain length of time. Medical residents have to do, 24-hour and 36-hour shifts. It's a little ableist. So these people, they're like, we'll just push through it. And as a patient who literally was just not able to push through it, I have compassion for those people. So as a pharmacist, I certainly have more understanding to the patients. As a patient, I have a little more appreciation and understanding for what the pharmacist and the doctor is going through. They're seeing the same patients. They don't have a lot of time. The healthcare system has changed. They have to make sure they document everything. Another tip for like chronic pain patients is go for the PPO. So that way you don't have to have that primary referring you everywhere. Some primary cares like to gatekeep. Oh, I don't think you need that. Okay, well, I want to really go see an allergist or a rheumatologist. can you refer me? And skip that nonsense. Just get a PPO.
That's good advice as well. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Now we've come to our rapid fire 5 for 5 questions. Please answer honestly and quickly, whatever comes to mind. So the first one is, what's your favorite sound?
Cats purring.
That is a good one. What is your favorite word?
Scritches.
I don't know that one. Okay.
It's basically scratches. Like, I'm going to give my dog scratches, but giving her scritches.
Oh, I got it. Okay. What's your favorite guilty pleasure?
Right now, it's playing Hogwarts Legacy, the new Harry Potter game. Love it.
I'm sure you're not alone. And what's something you've learned that you wish other people would understand?
That life just really is not always that easy.
Yep.
It's not that simple.
Agree. Yep. And then the last one is, what advice would you give to an 18-year-old version of yourself?
To trust yourself.
That's a good one. Yeah. All right. Anything else you wanted to add?
Just to go kind of a little more on the trust yourself, I said it before, but I really just want to emphasize that you as the patient know more about yourself and your experience than anyone else. No one needs to tell you what you're feeling for it to be valid. If you feel sick and you feel in your heart of hearts that something is not right, keep searching for an answer. That thought that something is not right led me to determining that I had copper overload, and I got that taken care of, and it has changed my life. And I just want everyone to be able to find answers for what's bothering them.
Well, that is great advice. I hope people take it to heart. I think they will. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for joining us and sharing your experiences and recommendations. I think your perspective is a unique one, and I think people are really going to appreciate it. So thanks for sharing.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here and happy to be able to share my story.
This episode showed how one individual's search for answers could really become her life purpose. Dr. Chelsea Liebowitz shared about her struggles with many types of pain and mental health challenges, and how she was eventually able to regain control of her conditions. As many people with disabilities often face, Chelsea shared how medical gaslighting and the impacts of not feeling heard or believed really took a heavy toll on her. Throughout, Chelsea remained determined and eventually earned her Doctor of Pharmacy degree to help her find answers to her questions. Chelsea talked about what it's like to work inside an insurance company, including handling prior authorizations and what your doctor's offices should be sure to include. She also shared a number of recommendations for how to ensure you can get your medications, including getting in touch with a case manager or patient advocate. Chelsea also shared her philosophy on the use of medicines to help with symptom relief and spoke about the difference between medical dependence and addiction. Chelsea shared some important tips about how our bodies process medications and when and how to decide when to come off of medications. Chelsea's story is a great example of how someone can go from being the patient and not feeling heard or respected to working hard to find their own answers and eventually share their experience to inspire others to do the same. Thanks for listening to Reimagining Life from Pain to Purpose. We're always interested to hear your feedback and questions. So leave a review and drop us a note at reimagininglifepodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. We hope you'll tune in for the next episode.